You moved my things without asking? I asked, calm, but already gone inside. After paying $3,500 a month to support them, they gave my room to my nephew and told me to sleep on the couch. I didn't argue. I just said 7 words, I'm moving out, into my own apartment. They laughed, until I added, I sold my app for $850,000. Silence. That's how the quiet daughter walked away, for good. I'm Annie, and I earned a degree in computer programming from college. I already had a job after graduation, unlike the majority of my classmates, who were frantically looking for one. A mid-sized software company called Soft Tech Solutions, which had appreciated my work during a summer internship, made me an offer during my 3rd year. The job offer included a respectable income, which would have allowed me to move out on my own as soon as I graduated. However, I didn't. One evening as we gathered around the dining table, Mom said, Annie, we were hoping you might consider staying with us a bit longer. Dad, who appeared a little embarrassed, nodded next to her. What are you saying? I responded, perplexed by their request, I thought you'd be happy to finally have the house to yourselves. Dad cleared his throat. Well, darling, the fact is that we're struggling to pay all of the bills right now. Both your mother and I are getting older, and our costs are increasing. Mom hastily added, it would really help us out if you stayed and maybe contributed a little to the household. I observed their anxious expressions. I was reared by these people, who also helped me pay for college. I couldn't say no, even though I had been dreaming about owning a home for years. How much would be beneficial? I inquired. Their faces instantly showed relief. Perhaps $1,800 a month, Dad said hesitantly. For groceries and bills. At the age of 22, I suddenly found myself supporting my parents. The remainder of my pay remained in my savings account, which I watched increase monthly. I only bought the necessities and the odd tiny indulgence for myself. Why should I spend money on unnecessary items? Vanessa, my sister, had a very different outlook on money. She had a son named Leo who was 7 years old, was married to her college lover Daniel, and was 7 years older than me. They pretended to have a lot of money, even though they didn't, and lived in a luxury apartment across town. Annie, my God. Really, are you wearing that shirt once more? During one of her Sunday visits, Vanessa commented. While Mom was playing with Leo and Daniel while Dad watched football, she was lying on our folks' couch, browsing on her phone. I glanced at my simple blue t-shirt. What's the matter? She gave a dramatic roll of her eyes. In your Facebook photo from the previous year, I noticed that you were wearing it. Do you never purchase new clothing? Weeks ago, the new Stella McCartney collection was released. I don't require new clothing. Trying not to get upset with her, I answered, these ones work fine. She said, this is why you're still single, as though my lack of expensive clothes was a weakness of some sort. A girl who appears to shop at Goodwill is not desirable to any guy. I didn't want to bring up the fact that she and Daniel were living paycheck to paycheck, even though Daniel had a lucrative career, and I had a growing savings account. As Vanessa explained, she worked part-time at a boutique mostly to fight boredom, but their combined income vanished as soon as it arrived. Travel, dining, clothing, and anything else that piqued their interest throughout that week. Later that day, Vanessa cornered me in the kitchen as I was doing the dishes and said, "Hey, Annie." Her tone had changed from derisive to endearing. "May I borrow $450? I've had my eye on this dress, and this month I'm a touch short." I let out a sigh. This was not the first instance, nor would it be the final one. I dried my hands with a towel and responded, "Sure. You are the greatest." She murmured as she gave me a brief embrace. "You are my favorite sister because of this." I told her that I was her only sister, but she was already messaging someone, most likely to let them know she could actually afford the dress. When I wasn't working at my day job, I would spend most of my evenings working on a side project, an app for home security systems that I thought would completely change how people kept an eye on their houses. In addition to integrating with current camera systems, it would offer intelligent alerts and intuitive controls that the market currently lacks. Annie, midnight is almost here. You're still using that computer, but why? Mom grumbled as she stood in her robe in my doorway. You're increasing our electricity costs. I apologize, Mom. I continued to stare at my laptop as I said, just finishing up something. As they made their way back to their bedroom, I overheard Dad say to Mom, all she does is play those stupid games. It makes sense why she is unable to find a boyfriend. Correcting them didn't bother me. I didn't have the energy to explain what I was working on, and they wouldn't understand anyhow. Allowing people to believe what they wanted to believe was sometimes simpler. I had no idea that my peaceful existence of conserving money and surreptitiously coding would soon be completely upended in ways I could not have predicted. On a Tuesday night, the first indication of problems appeared. When I got home from work, the front door was pushed open with a box, and our driveway was crowded with cars. I entered a state of pandemonium. The living room was crammed with bags, stacked boxes, and a variety of furnishings. My sister was guiding our parents as if they were relocating corporate staff. What's happening? I stood motionless in the doorway and inquired. Are you relocating? I had never seen Daniel seem so devastated as he did when he emerged from the hallway. His fine clothes were crumpled, and his normally assured stance was slouched. Before Daniel could say anything, Vanessa declared, Daniel lost his job. How harshly did they treat him, do you think? He was betrayed by his own friend. What took place? I looked at Daniel as I asked. He was unable to look me in the eye. It's difficult. The term creative accounting was used. I was taking out a loan from the corporation. Vanessa leapt on the defense. However, he intended to repay everything. When the director, who was meant to be his friend, learned about it during an audit, he became furious. You're saying that he was stealing? I asked thoughtfully. There was silence in the room. My parents looked at each other uncomfortably. Vanessa yelled, that's a terrible thing to say. His friend requested that Daniel step down and return the money. That's reasonable, given, I began. Just? Vanessa interrupted, raising her voice, true friends don't treat each other that way. They recognize when you're in a difficult situation. Since logic wasn't acceptable in this discourse, I changed the topic. Rather, I remained silent as my sister took over our parents' home as if it were her own, directing everyone while making no contributions. Vanessa, Daniel, and Leo would be staying with us just until they get back on their feet, Mom said during dinner. I nodded and braced myself for what I knew was coming, an epic nightmare. Almost instantly, the horror started. Having Vanessa's relatives around threw my peaceful, tidy life into disarray. Within 2 weeks, Daniel obtained a new work, but it only paid half of what he had previously earned, despite his loud complaints to everyone who would listen. Vanessa continued working part-time at the boutique, putting in just enough hours to make it seem like she was making a difference, but she wasn't really doing much to help them out financially. One evening at dinner, Vanessa pushed her plate aside and complained, this chicken is so dry. Do you not know how to use seasoning, Mom? The meal at Bellissimo's was fantastic, and we used to go there every Thursday. Rather than defend her cuisine or advise Vanessa to prepare her own dinner, Mom simply gave an apologetic nod. I apologize, my love. Next time, I'll attempt to perform better. I kept my mouth shut and stabbed at my perfectly good chicken. There was a significant change in the dynamic within the house. Vanessa had somehow taken center stage in everyone's thoughts and worries. Her troubles affected everyone. Her objections were handled as though they were legitimate issues that required prompt resolution. And me? The ATM in the corner that handled bill payment was me. I was using my security app late one evening when Vanessa stormed into my room without knocking. I need to borrow $600, she declared, eschewing her customary pretense of gentleness. We plan to take Leo to the Iman M Park this weekend, and he needs new sneakers. Since we came here, he has been really agitated. Daniel just got paid, right? I inquired. She yelled, we have other expenses. Will you lend a hand or not? At the time, I gave in. But I ultimately resisted when she requested again the next week. Vanessa asked me for money in front of everyone at dinner, and I offered that maybe you should think about working full-time. Vanessa obviously thought that I wouldn't say no in front of others. The boutique is hiring. In their window, I noticed the sign. Vanessa's face flushed. Your cruelty is unbelievable. I have to be available for Leo after school, you know. I said, Mom and Dad are always here. They could spend a few hours observing him. That isn't the purpose. She yelled, dropped her napkin, and raced out the room. Daniel trailed behind, glaring at me as he left. Annie, how could you be so heartless? Mom said, shaking her head at me. Your sister is experiencing a challenging period. I whispered, we're all going through a tough time. However, nobody was paying attention. To be honest, I was relieved when Vanessa stopped talking to me for a week. I finished my security app during the calm period. It was finally ready to show someone after months of spending weekends and late nights bent over my computer. When I showed my employer Mark the functionality of the app at his office, he said, this is amazing. As I demonstrated to him how it could recognize particular movements, differentiate between people and animals, and deliver personalized notifications, his eyes grew wide. The user interface is really easy to use. Did you create all of these algorithms yourself? Trying not to appear overly proud, I nodded. It has long been a side project of mine. Mark reclined in his seat and looked at me with fresh admiration. Good luck, this has the potential to totally upend the home security industry. If we had this, we could dominate the market. My heart pounded. I had been waiting for this time. He said, I'm willing to give you $850,000 in exchange for complete ownership and a portion of future sales. What are your thoughts? Despite the adrenaline pumping through me, I made an effort to maintain a neutral demeanor. Plus royalties, $500,000. It exceeded my wildest expectations. I managed to say, that sounds fair, as though I were negotiating six-figure agreements on a daily basis. After shaking hands, I left his office in a stupor. I just became rich overnight. However, I decided not to notify my family while I was driving home. The money would vanish into Vanessa's shopping binges or my parents' support of her lifestyle if they found out. I wasn't going to blow this opportunity for independence. That night, I got in touch with Sarah, a friend of mine who works as a realtor and had assisted one of my coworkers in finding an apartment. Speaking softly from my car in the driveway, I called her and said, I need a place of my own. I want to purchase a flat near my place of employment that is ready for immediate occupancy. Are you able to assist? Yes, without a doubt. I already have a few locations in mind. When you get off work tomorrow, let's get together. Everyone was gathering in the living room when I arrived home, which was not typical for a weeknight. As soon as I went in, they stopped talking. Their faces were a mixture of embarrassment and resolve as I entered. Mom patted the area next to her on the sofa and said, Annie, we need to talk to you. I took a cautious seat. What's going on? Dad cleared his throat. After examining our spending, we've discovered that things are becoming tight. The utility expenditures have significantly increased due to the presence of 5 adults and a child in the home. Additionally, groceries, you have no idea how much food a developing boy need. Mom went on to explain, what your father is attempting to convey is that we were hoped you could make a slightly larger contribution to the family expenses. Simply put, the $1,800 you have been giving us no longer covers everything. I surveyed the space. My parents had a hopeful but ashamed expression. Vanessa pretended that this wasn't her idea while she examined her manicure, but I knew it was. At least Daniel had the grace to appear uneasy. Are Daniel and Vanessa making any contributions? I inquired. My parents looked at each other. Well, Mom remarked quietly, they're in a tough spot right now. Additionally, you have no dependents and are unmarried. You have a little more money to give. I inhaled deeply while mentally counting to 10. How much more? Dad proposed, we were thinking, maybe $3,500 a month. I wanted to chuckle. Or weep. Or shout. I simply nodded instead. All right. Beginning this month. With a faint smile on her lips, Vanessa looked up at last. She believed she had triumphed. She had no idea that her triumph would not last long. 10 minutes from my job, in a lovely apartment complex, I met Sarah 3 days later. She showed me a modern, light-filled, one-bedroom apartment on the top floor with a tiny balcony, and it was ideal. I signed the documents that same day and purchased it outright using some of the money I had made from selling my application. I was surreptitiously outfitting my new apartment when I became aware of an odd occurrence at my parents' place. During supper, Mom, Dad, and Vanessa kept exchanging strange glances as if they were all involved in some covert scheme. Daniel kept his head down most of the time, concentrating on his meal and occasionally assisting Leo with the meat cutting. There was undoubtedly a problem. However, I was unable to determine what. It didn't take me long to learn. I discovered my books, clothes, laptop, and even my childhood pet bear thrown carelessly into the hallway when I returned home from work 2 days later. I mumbled, "What the hell?" before dumping my luggage and making my way directly to my bedroom. However, it was no longer my bedroom. Leo was playing a video game while seated on my bed, which was now covered with superhero sheets. Cartoon character pictures now hung on the walls where my programming credentials had formerly been. Instead of my desk, where I had developed my program, a kid-sized table covered in action figures and crayons had taken its place. Aunt Annie. Leo looked up from his game and said, "Take a look at my new space. Isn't that awesome?" Vanessa came up behind me in the doorway before I could respond. She answered without seeming astonished, "Oh, you're home. What's happening?" Despite the anger that was swelling inside of me, I inquired in a deadly calm voice. Vanessa shrugged, as though it were the most normal thing in the world, and continued, "We moved Leo into your room. He needs more room for his schoolwork and toys." "And just where am I meant to sleep?" I inquired. Behind Vanessa, Mom showed up, trembling and wringing her hands. "Annie, dear, we figured you wouldn't mind using the sofa in the living room since you're rarely home anyway, always at work or on that computer." I turned from Mom to Vanessa, who was beaming with smug satisfaction and wasn't even attempting to hide it. "You transferred everything I owned without asking, then?" Vanessa remarked, "If we asked, we knew you'd make a fuss." And Leo was in dire need of the room. His previous space was hardly larger than a cupboard. Speaking about his former room, why am I unable to utilize it? I inquired. Mom and Vanessa exchanged another of those evasive glances. "We felt Vanessa could use a dressing room," Mom remarked reluctantly. "She has a lot of clothes, you know. Additionally, her and Daniel's room just cannot accommodate them all." I looked at them, stunned for a second. In order to create a dressing room for my sister, they had forced me out of my bedroom, which I had owned since I was a young child and which I was basically paying for with my $3,500 monthly payment. The sibling who wasn't making any money for the family. I glanced at her high-end attire. Then at my hallway mound of possessions. And I felt something break inside of me. However, I simply shrugged rather than yelling or sobbing as they most likely anticipated. "You know what? That's all right," I responded coolly. "I'll be sleeping in my own apartment, so I won't be sleeping on the sofa." Vanessa chuckled. "All right. Your fictitious abode. Annie, give it up. You don't have an apartment, as we all know." "Actually, I do," I answered. "I purchased it a week ago." I was going to tell you everything this weekend, but it looks like you've helped me decide. Vanessa and Mom looked at me as if I had grown a second head. You purchased an apartment? Mom inquired. How? How much money? I turned to go downstairs and muttered, that doesn't matter. The fact that I'm leaving is what counts. Today. I called a moving firm from the living room and reserved their first available time slot, which was early tomorrow morning. I then requested a day off by calling my boss. My family lingered close by during all of this, their faces changing from incredulous to increasingly alarmed. When Dad eventually entered the conversation after walking in from the garage, he replied, Annie, you can't be serious. I'm being totally serious. I said, hanging up the phone with the movers. They are scheduled to arrive at 6:30 a.m. to pick up my belongings tomorrow. But Mom demanded that we discuss this. We can work things out if the space is causing you distress. Perhaps Leo could spend some time sharing with us or... I cut in, it's not about the room. It has to do with respect. Limitations. Additionally, you treat me like I'm less valuable than the other residents of this property despite the fact that I pay $3,500 a month to live here. Vanessa, who had been unusually silent, broke the silence. Wait, you really purchased an apartment? How much money? You are merely an inexperienced coder. I didn't give her a direct response. I said, I'm going to pack what's left of my belongings now, as I passed them and made my way to the hallway pile. The movers showed up at 6:30 a.m. the following day. Sharp. I pointed them toward the hallway's growing pile of possessions as I collected the remainder of my goods from various locations throughout the house. As the men carried box after box out to the truck, my family watched in startled silence. Where is this flat exactly? As I was making one last check to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, Dad finally asked. Near my office, I murmured incoherently. What was the price? Vanessa insisted. How did you manage to pay for it? I looked at my family. As if I were carrying out some weird rite they couldn't understand, they were all standing in the living room, watching me. That isn't really your concern. Mom's voice was shaking as she said, we're your family. It's our business, of course. Mom, family is reciprocal, I answered. And in this house, it has only gone one way for a long time. What is meant by that? Vanessa gave a defensive snap. I remarked, it means I'm done being everyone's ATM. I'm done giving money that is never used responsibly, never appreciated, and never enough. You're leaving us, then? With tears in her eyes, Mom inquired. How about the bills? The groceries? How about them? I answered. Daniel and Vanessa are grown-ups with jobs. Allow them to help make a difference. Vanessa objected, saying, we can hardly afford our own expenses. I said, then perhaps you ought to reevaluate your spending patterns. Anger flushed Vanessa's face. You know what? You ought to offer us your apartment, in my opinion. You don't need it as much as we do. We are parents to a child. I couldn't resist laughing. The sheer insolence was nearly astounding. No, Vanessa. I will not give my apartment to you. I will no longer give you anything. In the doorway came one of the movers. Everything has been loaded. Miss, are you prepared to leave? I picked up my purse and nodded. I'm prepared. Please, Annie, Mom made one final attempt. Don't go out like this. I said, I'll give you a call in a few days, but I didn't promise anything else. Goodbye. With each mile that removed me from my family's home, I felt more free as I accompanied the moving truck to my new apartment. I was prioritizing myself for the first time in my adult life. And it was surprisingly pleasant. The following few days passed quickly as we set up utilities, scheduled furniture deliveries, and unpacked. Knowing that my phone would be inundated with messages from my relatives, I mostly kept it off. I was correct when I eventually switched it on. There are dozens of missed calls and texts, ranging from appealing to guilt-tripping to enraged. I made the decision to go to my parents' house after a week of silence. I wanted to discuss expectations and boundaries in a cool, collected manner. The curtains twitched as I pulled into the driveway that Saturday morning. They had been keeping an eye out for me. Before I could reach the door, it swung open. Mom drew me into a close embrace. With a look of relief on her face, she added, "Thank goodness you came back. We've been really anxious." Behind her, Dad showed up, looking both content and uneasy. Leo was playing on the floor while Vanessa and Daniel were already sat in the living room. I told them right away, before they might misunderstand, I'm not moving back. I came just to talk. Mom pulled me in and said, "We understand. We've also been thinking a lot." I didn't think so. Nevertheless, I took a seat. "Annie," Dad said, "we see we were wrong. You can return to your room whenever you'd like." Leo returned to his previous room, Vanessa hastily added. Additionally, I failed to create a dressing room. Our bedroom can accommodate my wardrobe. I observed their excited expressions. "Thank you," I replied, "but I'm content where I am now." But Mom said, "We miss you. And you're needed here." The true cause of their abrupt change of heart was right there. I gently reprimanded her, saying, "You need my money." Nobody disputed it. "Perhaps we could figure something out," Vanessa said. "You might still assist us with finances, but you could keep your flat. Or, you may have this house once more if we move into your flat." I nearly burst out laughing at her foolishness. "No, Vanessa. I will not give my apartment to you. Or my funds. However, that is unfair." She cried out. "You're very self-centered. In any case, how did you manage to afford an apartment? You must have spent years keeping money hidden from us." "I made a sale on an app. One I created," I stated plainly. "You all assumed I was playing video games as I worked on the security program at night. The price my boss paid for it was $850,000. In addition to royalties." The ensuing hush was deafening. $500,000, Daniel muttered at last. Mom appeared weak. "What kept you from telling us?" she inquired. "Sincerely," I answered, "because I knew what would happen. You would have come up with reasons why you were more deserving of that money than I was. Nobody could contest that." "So you're simply leaving us?" Vanessa asked in a serious tone. "Following all that we have done for you?" I got to my feet. "Vanessa, what specifically have you done for me? Never paid back the money you borrowed? Criticized my attire? Moved my belongings without my request?" She didn't know how to respond. "I'll be your daughter forever." I looked at each of them and added, "And your sister. However, I will no longer be your bank." They were calling me ungrateful as I was leaving. Selfish. Callous. However, those comments didn't hurt for the first time. It's been 6 months since then. I haven't communicated with my relatives. They have attempted to contact you, but they have always done so with requests for money under the pretext of reconciliation. I've heard from common friends that they continue to live together. I'm still whining about money. Now, let's talk about my abandonment. I'm doing well in the interim. My apartment is ideal. I'm making quick progress in my career. My app's royalties are gradually building up. I've begun taking trips. Purchased some lovely clothing, but nothing Vanessa would be pleased with. Additionally, I've started dating someone who values my pragmatic approach. I occasionally question whether I made the correct decision. But then I recall how they viewed me, not as a member of the family to be revered, but as a tool to be employed. Furthermore, I am aware that leaving wasn't selfish. Self-preservation was the reason. The hardest and most liberating lesson I've ever learned was that sometimes the best retaliation is just choosing yourself. In peace, not in rage. Leaving people who treat you like a second-class citizen is not a sign of weakness. It's powerful. Remind yourself that you don't have to struggle to win if you've been harmed, deceived, or ignored. All you have to do is rise, heal, and grow. Establish limits. Make an investment in yourself. And allow your accomplishments to speak for themselves. Have you ever experienced such betrayal? I'd love to know how you discovered your strength, so please share your story in the comments section.